Well, hello, this is Pastor Russ, and it's Monday, so it's time for our mini Bible study, a Bible study that I promise will be done in 10 minutes or less each Monday. And we're studying the book of Genesis. And right now we're in chapter 8 of Genesis. If you remember last week in chapter 7, that Noah had been on the ark for a little less than half of a year, about 150 days. And now we're coming to the end of the time of the ark on the earth. So let me get my glasses here, and we'll read chapter 8, and then I'll make some comments on it. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him on the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now in verse 1 here, we have an interesting phrase, God remembered Noah. Now, it's not as if God forgot about Noah and then suddenly, oh yeah, that's right, we've got Noah down there. But it means that God turns his active attention to Noah. He's always in the know of what's happening. And then it also says that God sent a wind over the earth. God knows exactly how to take care of these excess waters that covered all of the earth. Continuing with verse 2. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down, and on the 17th day of the seventh month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Now this dating by the calendar is by the Jewish calendar, so it's not our Gregorian calendar that they're talking about here, but it was the seventh month, the 17th day of the Jewish calendar, and the ark came to rest on top of the mountain. Verse 5, the waters continued to recede until the 10th month, 3 months later, and the tops of the mountains became visible. Now here we see another indication, more evidence that this was a worldwide flood, because he's talking about here the tops of the mountains. And so it wasn't just a localized flood, but it was worldwide. After 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. The raven never did come back. Ravens are scavenger birds, and so it probably was feeding on the dead carcasses that were floating in the water is what it was, and never did come back to the ark. Then verse 8. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground, but the dove could find no place to set its feet because there was water all over the surface of the earth. So it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there was in its beak a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that water had receded from the earth. So he sends out a different bird, sends out a dove, which is not a scavenger. And so because it couldn't find a place to light, it came back to the ark, and Noah waited more time, 7 days. And then it came back, the dove came back with a olive leaf in its mouth. Now, it's not an olive branch. It's certainly not an olive bough. First of all, a dove couldn't pluck a bough or a branch off of a tree and couldn't carry that weight in its mouth. So often we see, the symbol of peace as a dove with the olive branch in its mouth, but that's not physically possible. And we need to stick to what Scripture says here. And Scripture says it was an olive leaf. So it was a leaf of an olive tree in its mouth. And then Noah knew that the water had receded. In verse 12, he waited 7 more days, sent out the dove again, but this time it did not return to him. Of course, the inference there is that it found a place to live. The earth was now able to be, habitated by animals and by humans. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it. And it's amazing to me, in all this time, over a year's time of being on this boat, being on the ark, not one animal has suffered, has died at all. So verse 18, so Noah came out together with his sons and his wives and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, and all the birds, everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. It's interesting to me here that the first thing that Noah did when he returned to the earth was that he sacrificed. He worshiped God. He took some of all the clean animals that he had and he sacrificed. And it wasn't an easy sacrifice. It really was a more risky sacrifice, because he really could have said to himself, I need all of these animals to repopulate the earth. But instead, he used some of the clean animals, some of the clean birds, and he sacrificed a burnt offering to God. God doesn't just want to try to make us suffer, but he wants to have us make a costly sacrifice to him, and that's exactly what Noah did. And then chapter 8 ends with verse 22. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. So here we see the start of the seasons of the year, a time that things will rotate around. The heavens had opened up, the atmosphere had changed, and so now we are living in literally a brand new world. And we'll continue the story next week with chapter 9 of the book of Genesis, as we continue the story of Noah, and then we start to look at the continuing story, which is the main story of Genesis, and that's the story of Abraham and his family. But that's for a few chapters down the road. So I hope you have a great day, and join with me again next Monday as we do another mini Bible study on the book of Genesis. So I hope you have a great and wonderful day, and this is Pastor Russ saying so long.